All right, hi guys. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 7, Critical and Creative Thinking. This is one of my favorite subjects, along with what we just talked about with strategic learning and our learning theories. So, again, college really is going to push you to be a critical thinker. As we mentioned in the other lectures, we want you to be able to look at things from different perspectives. We want you to get to the peak of that Bloom's taxonomy triangle with the analyzing, evaluating, and creative pieces of learning. That is the highest levels of critical thinking. So we want you to apply a lot of logic to what you're seeing. We're going to identify the CRAP test, which will help you evaluate sources, identify strategies to help develop yourself and applications, explore key elements and stages of the creative process. And by creative process, I don't mean, being able to draw or sing or necessarily art. It's more of problem solving, looking at things from multiple lenses instead of just hitting that same wall and stopping. And then applying those skills to stimulate creative perspectives and innovative options. Okay, so starting with critical thinking, what is it? What is it to you? It's a clear, reasonable, reflective thinking. It's the process of questioning information. You should be questioning information and looking at it. I will tell you right now, with critical thinking, I think it's so important right now. We're seeing a lot of divisiveness in the world right now. And data and information it's muddy. It's very messy. I think more so than it's ever been. I can tell you for myself, I follow about 8 to 10 different news sources. I feel like that's the best way to get data and information. It's a little bit more cumbersome than trying to sort through it, but I follow multiple ones. Another thing that I do, if you're political at all, is I follow people I like, and I also follow people I may not agree with. And I do this so I can see what they're really putting out there, not what KXAN or MSNBC say that they're putting out there, but I want to see it for myself. So those are some ways to really start getting better information, but you always want to question it. If you see a headline, look at the source, and we'll talk about that. And then find it on multiple news sites if you really want to know what's going on with it. Read the full article, not just the headline. Things like that. It involves how do we know, and is this true in the case or just this instant? That's important to know. How do we know this? I think we all grew up with, mom or dad or an aunt or grandma telling you something, and we took it as truth. Sometimes they're what we call old wives' tales, right? Or an urban legend. I love my mother, but she's a fan of saying, well, they say this and they say that. And it's like, well, who's they? Why are they saying that? And she doesn't know. It does involve being a little bit skeptical and challenging assumptions. We want you to go more than the memorizing facts. Like I said in the previous video, we don't want you to tell us what the book says. We want to know what you think about it, why you think about it, where is that coming from, what do other perspectives think about that subject. So it's important to ask questions to formulate that logical reason perspective. It's also really important to analyze our opinion from fact. A lot of us tend to put our opinion as truths, and we need to be really careful with that. So knowing what's happening, gather that basic information. Why is it important? Is it significant? Is it significant to you? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's somebody else's crisis or high priority, and maybe it's not significant to you. This one I really love. What don't I see? And this is what I mean about following multiple news sources and maybe following people that you don't agree with to see if there's important missing information, because things do get slighted. Every news source has some sort of bias. Some are way deep more into their biases. Some are opinion pieces, and that's important to know. HuffPost is a lot of opinions. They present their articles with a lot of facts and statistics that form their opinions, but they're pretty openly a little bit more biased, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with getting information there as long as it's not your sole source of information and you understand that they're writing with a bias and they're writing with a lot of opinion pieces. It's important to look for some that might be a little bit more neutral. Guardian, NPR tend to kind of walk the line, but you're still getting information through the lens of whoever wrote it and whatever they think about it. So that's why you want to see and expand on it. Is there something missing? Is there more to this story? Ask yourself where the information came from. So I just sort of touched on that. A blog versus a news site is very, very different. We all know we can't use Wikipedia as a good source anymore. It's important to know where that information came from, because somebody could be giving you information to convince you of their argument, and that's very different from somebody laying out facts and be like, take what you want from it. This is what's being reported, or this is what the numbers look like. Again, looking at who is saying it. So who wrote the opinion piece? Is it a journalist that has an opinion column, or is it a politician or a celebrity or somebody that might have a little bit more of an angle, whether they're convincing you of their argument or convincing you to buy something? It's important to know who is saying it. Critical thinking and problem solving go hand in hand. This is where I feel like a lot of college students get stuck. They start maybe dipping their grades one semester because maybe they have personal issues going on, motivational issues, their job increased hours. There's literally a lot of reasons why that can happen. And sometimes, especially in online, they disappear. And that's not really problem solving. That's sort of problem avoiding, right? There's ways that they can go about it, but it's a matter of sitting down and kind of brainstorming all of our strategies. And we'll talk a little bit more of that with creative thinking. Going to those knowledge, facts, and data to solve your problems effectively. So being really, really careful of not having that knee-jerk reaction or reacting in an emotion, but taking the time to sort of, what makes sense? How does this make sense? And really laying it out. All right, evaluating information. This is so critical in a day of age where information is everywhere. You don't even ask for it, right? Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, they all just throw information at us now. And it's getting harder and harder, I think, to evaluate information. So we need to be prepared for it. We need to be able to read for understanding. So whether it's something online, whether you're looking at an article and you're doing research for a paper, you need to read for understanding. Examine the arguments. So look at arguments for and against. If you're writing a paper and you're developing your argument, look at the arguments that are against whatever it is that you're trying to defend. Usually you need to address them, but you also need to see if there's a merit. I have had students who struggle with writing the paper, and it's because their arguments aren't good. Unfortunately, they're reading arguments for or against, but they can't find any information supporting their own argument. And that's a case where you really need to examine your own argument. Maybe your argument's bad. Maybe what you thought about the situation is incorrect because you were misinformed and you didn't have all of the facts, and that's totally fine. Part of critical thinking is evolving and changing our minds as necessary as we get new information. And that's part of that clarify thinking, what's going on with your argument, or if you're reading a text or you're reading something online, what's going on with it? Is it trying to sell you one way or another, trying to push you one way or another? And what do you think about it? Take that, watch that video, read that article, read the journal, whatever it is, and then set it aside and think about what you think about it. And then the cultivate habits of mind. The more you practice these strategies, the more they become second nature. You'll become annoying to your friends and family who post things online, and you start asking, well, where did that come from? Who said that? People don't like to know those kinds of things sometimes, but it is really, really important for you to know where the information comes from. This is a way to kind of break down information, whether you're reading it, hearing it, watching it, and sort of evaluate it to make sure that it's good information. So the first step is currency, and that's going to want to know when the article was written. What was happening in 1980 is very different than what's happening today. So using an article to craft your argument that is 40 years old is not going to be a strong argument. So if you're on the library's website, you can filter by years. I usually don't look at anything when I'm doing research, usually past 2000, ideally between 2010 and 2020. It also kind of depends on the things that you're looking up. Obviously, maybe if you're doing a history paper, you could use something from 1980, but you'd still want to find a little bit more current. But if you're doing something like in medical or scientific, you definitely want to stay current because those things are the kinds of things that are constantly changing. Relevance. Does it really matter to your argument? You want to be real careful that you're not stretching just to cite a source, and that it does matter to your argument. We'll use all or part of the resource and why. How does it change? So we talked about earlier, if you're struggling finding anything to back up your argument or to create evidence for your argument, you really want to reassess your argument. And then looking at the material's intended audience. Again, you can use something from a blog, but a lot of times you just kind of have to state why you're using it. Usually what's more helpful, if you're using an opinion piece, they'll have their own citation. So if they quote a number or a statistic, you can go to the original statistic and quote it yourself. That is usually the best way to go back to the original source. All right, what is the author's credential? This is important. I could absolutely write an article on how to fix a car. Never in my life tried to fix a car, but I could make some stuff up and put it on the internet because that's how the internet works. And then you go and you write a paper on the evolution of cars, and then you have my stuff in there where I'm using words that don't make sense because you didn't check me out. So be sure to look at the author's credentials. Again, depending on where you're getting sources, a lot of this is done for you. If you're using strong news sites, government sites that provide a lot of data, you don't have to worry about this so much. If you're using the library and the databases, you're getting these peer-reviewed articles from journals and stuff. A lot of this is done for you. But if you're getting something outside of those on your own, you want to go through this and see who wrote it, why they wrote it, what are their credentials, and what is their knowledge in the subject. Again, accuracy, if you're reading something and there's no citations, a real common, again, is, well, 80% of people think the sky is blue. Where did you get 80%? If there's no sort of citation, if that didn't come up from anything, then that person pulled it out of their butt. And you do not want that in your paper. So be real careful that you're looking at how they're citing their own sources and where they're getting their own information as they're presenting them as fact or biases. You want to be able to verify the information. You don't necessarily need to go through everything and verify it, but you need to check that there's a reference page and citations, and you could verify it if you need it. And then purpose, that again goes back to when we talked about critical thinking. Who is giving you this information? Is it a journalist? Is it the, again, you can go to like the U.S. Labor Bureau and get employment statistics, and that information is out there for anybody that is out there. There's no specific author. The author is the U.S. Labor Bureau, and you can get those numbers. You're not worried about, they're not trying to sell you anything. They're not trying to persuade you. They're just giving you numbers. If you're looking at an opinion piece, that's a little bit different. Again, if you're looking outside of using the library databases or certain kind of websites, you want to be real careful in knowing the author's purpose. If they're trying to sell you something, then be really, really careful with that. Make sure those citations are there. Make sure they're presenting it. It's okay for them to say, hey, I'm super biased on this, and this is why. And you can use that. It's when they try to convince you that it's a fact. These are facts and it's opinions. And sometimes you really have to be careful and kind of screen through that information.